wrong. And this week our segment is back to what our past segment was, which is called You Can't Account for Stupid. So what are we talking about this week? This week we're talking about the case of Vincent Lee. Mr. Lee is a person in Canada who has schizophrenia. Apparently he was undiagnosed, and he was on a bus. He was traveling on a bus in 2008, and you'll probably recall this. He violently assaulted, killed, decapitated, and cannibalized a young man named Tim McLean. Decapitated, cannibalized, and killed this man on a bus. The RCMP and the police came to the crime scene. It was very gruesome. And then since 2008, Mr. Lee has been in the court system and in the mental health system, apparently, getting better, healing, etc. The point is this. Last week, in a decision of the Manatoba Criminal Review Board, he was granted an absolute discharge. Now, the chair of that board is a gentleman named John Stefaniak. There are mental health specialists and psychiatrists on this board. The person representing Mr. Lee is a fellow named Dr. Jeff Waldman, who said to the board in his submission that, Mr. Lee, in his view, should be given an absolute discharge because he should be fine as long as he takes his meds. Of course, the question is, what guarantee do we have related to that? In 1999, the Supreme Court of Canada ruled that any person who had a mental health issue that committed a criminal offense, and if it's proven that they had a mental health issue, they should be given an absolute discharge at the appropriate time by a review board if, and only if, they can assure the public that this person is of no threat to public health and safety. So I'm watching this case unfold, and I'm watching these people at this Manitoba Criminal Review Board give this fellow an absolute discharge, which, by the way, means he's free and clear. Absolute discharge means it's not on your record, you're free just like anyone else, you can go out and live your life with no consequence. Now, his defense lawyer at this hearing, a lawyer named Alan Libman, described Mr. Lee as a model patient, and he said he saw no reason why Mr. Lee should not be granted an absolute discharge. Well, I can give you a reason why. He cut off somebody's head. Like, what country are you in? He cut off a guy's head, like decapitated it, and then started cannibalizing it. In my mind, that's a good reason not to give a person an absolute discharge for anything for life. This isn't to say that we're not sympathetic with people who have mental health issues or have schizophrenia, and that we have to be sensitive to their needs and their treatment, and that we should be spending the public health money that is required to help these people, okay? But there's a nexus between public health policy and the justice and criminal justice system, and we cannot forget the victims of a criminal act, okay? What about the family and the mother of Tim McLean, the young man who was killed? Imagine for a second, maybe this board could have thought just for a second about the mental health of Tim McLean's mother, his family, his extended family, who have to live with the horror, the absolute horror for the rest of their life of knowing and reliving how their son died so tragically on that bus. Or cases like the RCMP officer who was first on the scene, who had to deal with this carnage, who suffered from PTSD because of it, and who in 2014, in the midst of all of this, committed suicide. Those are the victims. And here's where the Frankensteinish policy and perversion of our public health policy really goes off the rails, okay? The victim here is not Vincent Lee, who, by the way, has changed his name to Will Barker, and who, by the way, is apparently going to be allowed to travel back to his home country of China to maybe do the same thing in China. What if he doesn't stay on his meds? And here's the other thing I've learned with the mental health care system in this country. What's the big problem right now? What's everybody talking about? The fact that we don't have a national pharmaceutical plan, the fact that drugs are so expensive, the fact that this guy doesn't have a job. So what if he can't afford to get these drugs? Is someone guaranteeing he's got these drugs every day? So what if he can't afford the drugs, doesn't get the drugs, and he goes off, and then he goes off and does this on another bus? What is Mr. Stefaniak, Dr. Stefaniak, going to say then, or Mr. Walderman, or Mr. Libman, or Mrs. C. Holowik Sparks, the forensic mental health specialist who agreed with all of this? I have one question for you, and correct me if I'm wrong when I say that I don't believe you for a second. If you, as the people who made this decision, apparently in the public interest, in my view in violation of the Supreme Court statute, do you think for a second that you would be comfortable with Mr. Lee, Vincent Lee, with his absolute discharge, moving in next door to you, living next door to where your family is, living next door to your apartment? You would be comfortable for that? Here's the thing. If you say yes to that, you're lying. You're lying because no human being who knows the horrific nature of what transpired here will be comfortable with this man living next door to them. So, it doesn't mean that that he should be incarcerated or in a mental facility the rest of his life, but what it does mean to honor the victim and to respect public health and safety, that Mr. Lee needs to be monitored for the rest of his life. The idea that we're just going to let him out into the public with no monitoring, or even let him go to China, where none of this will be known, is an absolute disgrace, and these people, apparent professionals, are doing a great disservice to public policy in Canada. And on that note, I want to thank everyone for joining us for another segment of Correct Me If I'm Wrong, and we look forward to talking to you again soon. Thank you.